Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. Listen, we do a lot of talking, especially lately, man. I like to talk about a lot of different boxers, a lot of different things in boxing, but there's just so much content on this damn Terence Crawford, Earl Spence. Really just Terence Crawford and Earl Spence. Like, no kidding, you could do like 1,000 videos a day. But what I want to talk about today is how I don't feel Terence Crawford will ever become 3 times undisputed. Now, I'm going to tell you this. I'll go ahead and predict, right, that if Terence Crawford, if the stars lined up just right, I think he could, quite easily become a 3 times undisputed. Because right now, you look, there's the 4-for-1 deal up there at 168 with Canelo, but it doesn't look like he's going to get that opportunity. You just never know, but realistically, it just doesn't look like that fight's going to happen, at least in the next couple of years, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is because Canelo has mandatories, man, and no matter who he faces, if he wins or loses, those sanctioning bodies, WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO, they want their belts defended. You know what I'm saying? And don't get me wrong. And I want to make sure that people understand this. When it comes to an undisputed bout, at more than likely, it's allowed to take precedence over, having a champion defend against a mandatory challenger, okay? But that's where you see someone like a situation where Charlo has 3 belts and then Tim Tszyu has 1 belt now, and instead of Charlo facing, like if Tim Tszyu wasn't fighting Mendoza, they may come down and say instead of Charlo facing this guy, well, I can't even pronounce his name, but I'll tell you his name right now. I don't want to mess up his name. Instead of Charlo facing Murtazaliev, I know I messed his name up, they would say, hey, pay him some step-aside money and let's go for the undisputed distinction. That way you bring all 4 belts together. But that doesn't mean it has to happen. You know what I'm saying? Sanctioning body's got to be cool with it. The opponent has to be cool with it. The champion has to be cool with it. Okay, so that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. But when you take a look at what's going on with the whole Canelo, I just think no matter what happens, I just think Canelo, even if he loses to whoever he fights, I just think they're going to have mandatories, and I just think Crawford's going to be sitting there in a holding pattern. And even if they, and the thing is, it's not like they'll get a voluntary defense. It's too many belts. Because once you defend against your mandatory here, yeah, maybe if you defend, let's say, your WBC belt against his mandatory, and you're an undisputed champion, okay, maybe in your next fight you get a voluntary defense. But the problem is, that's your next fight once you get through the IBF, WBO, and WBA mandatory. Now you're back at the WBC, and they may give you a voluntary defense. You see what I'm saying? So what you're going to see with guys like undisputed guys like Canelo Alvarez, and whoever, like I said, whoever beats him, if he gets beat, they're going to be in a situation like Anthony Joshua, where you just got mandatory after mandatory. So when you come back down, you take a look at Terence Crawford trying to go up to 154. Can't y'all see what's happening already? Okay, now they already took a belt from Jermell Charlo and gave it to Tim Tszyu. Now, if that's not the secret society working, I don't know what is. So there you go. They've already made it, I would say, difficult for Terence Crawford to become undisputed at the weight class that's probably more realistic for him. But it doesn't matter, man. Once he's clear of his rematch with Earl Spence, Terence Crawford's going to be he's going to be faced with a reality that he won't be fighting for a 3-time undisputed. Now we're talking about him fighting Spence in February. Let's say he does, as is rumored. Let's say he does go on to fight at 154, and he fights the winner of Tim Tszyu and Mendoza. Okay? Listen, those guys can fight. Tim Tszyu and Mendoza can fight. But let's say he gets up to 154 and he fights those guys. The whole 2024 is over for Terence Crawford. Y'all understand? He'll be 37 next year. So, he fights them. Then Jermell Charlo would have probably fought again. He has mandatories, right? Even if he wins, he could still end up being in a position where, more than likely, he'll have to defend his belts because he'll still have an IBF, WBC, and WBA. So what you could see is where he's now defending against the IBF mandatory. Hey, let me tell you something. He'll be looking at the WBA mandatory and the WBC mandatory. Or he could be looking at possibly going into a fight with Tim Tszyu. Long story short, the fight that would probably happen would probably be Jermell and Tim Tszyu, and Crawford still be in a holding pattern. But then you get to the end of the year, 2024 is pretty much a done deal. Now you got 2025, and now we're talking about Terence Crawford and whether or not he'll actually have an opportunity in 2025 to face a guy like Jermell or Tszyu or whoever ends up being the undisputed. And again, if Crawford's still holding on to those belts at 147, he may have an opportunity, but again, when you get guys like Madrimov, Charles Conwell at 154 who are just sitting there in a holding pattern, you know what I'm saying? Josh Taylor. These guys are all, in the number one positions. They're all mandatories for different sanction bodies. Not all of them are going to be okay with taking step-aside money. They're going to want to fight. They're going to want their opportunity. And the thing is this is what people need to understand. These guys who are sitting there in mandatory positions, right, especially this time next year, depending on if there's an undisputed champion at 154 again, that's if Jermell Charlo and Tim Tszyu, or whoever, let's just say they make a fight between now and the summer, and whoever ends up winning, whoever ends up standing as the undisputed champion at 154, right? Let me tell you something. Those guys, they may not even want to entertain a guy like Crawford. They may go on and do something different. But for Terence Crawford, I lost my train of thought while I was talking right there. But for Terence Crawford, I'm just trying to see how can he get a crack at these titles, and not just in a perfect world, like just understand realistically just what he's up against. Because you take a look at what happened with Stan Eunice at 147 in Earl Spence. Stan Eunice got paid some step-aside money, which promised a shot at Earl Spence. Then he got screwed over again, trying to get a fight, going off with Ortiz. Ortiz having his issues. Well, first it was rescheduled once, then rescheduled again. And the whole time, this whole fight with Ortiz was a result of him not being able to get a shot against Earl Spence. Long story short, you look at Stan Eunice and what ended up happening where Earl Spence ended up fighting Crawford. Stan Eunice got some step-aside money, so didn't end too bad for him, but still, we look at how the inactivity he had to incur as a result of the politics of boxing. You know, it kind of sucks for him. So when you come back to Terence Crawford, someone who really he's looking for the biggest fights out there. I'm not sure Terence Crawford's going to. It's just too many mandatories, man. And even for Terence Crawford, even though he may want to bubble up and fight somebody, he got too many mandatories too. Boots in his shit, man. What's his name? A step closer to him now. Mario Barrios. You got Cody Crowley's a step closer to him. You know what I mean? We just talked about Stanley Unis. Alexis Rocha is a step closer to him. So the bottom line is, when you look at these undisputed champions, the 4-for-1 deal is outstanding, right? But when you're an undisputed champion and you got all those mandatories, you're up. You know, you're up shit creek. Because unless Crawford just drops all those belts at 147, that may be something he has to do, and then he goes up to 154. And this is what makes it a little bit crazy. Is let's say somehow the belts at 154, which are already fragmented, right? Jamel has 3, Tim Tszyu has 1. Let's say those belts are further fragmented, where Jamel suddenly has to defend against 2 mandatories at the same time, and now he ends up losing a belt. Because I wouldn't be surprised if they start peeling these belts off of Jamel. All of a sudden, Crawford, first, he doesn't have the 4-for-1 deal right now. He has a 3-for-1 deal or a 1-for-1 deal, which I mean 1 belt, 1 fight, or 3 belts, 1 fight with Charlo. It's not going to be easy for him to gather all those belts up. So it could take, several years to get that done, man. And when Crawford, who only fights once a year, let me tell you something. Maybe trying to press for twice a year, I would just tell you that maybe Crawford, if he does end up in a position to fight for Undisputed, my boy Crawford may be damn near 39, 40 years old, man. And don't get me wrong, he's very athletic, but it doesn't seem like he wants to be around that long. And I don't know, do you think he'll stay around that long to accomplish that? I think by then Crawford would have become frustrated with boxing and the fact that he didn't get the big fights. He didn't get these lucrative fights. He didn't end up going out and doing like some of these other fighters and fighting in Saudi and making huge money, So what we could see Crawford doing is just jumping up and down, from 147, maybe up to 168. And just, just trying to find any fighter with the possibility of making something happen to where he can make the most money, because really, the 160-pound division is a lifeless division. So I think that's where he should target. But again, his goal of becoming 3 times undisputed is just not that easy. Okay? And who knows where he's going to be after this Earl Spence match. Still going to be independent, promoting himself? Is he going to be signed to a promoter? I don't know, but to put on a huge showcase as an independent promoter, I don't think that's realistic. I think he's going to need to have some kind of machine behind him to make that happen, even though he's done great things in the sport of boxing and has become a 2-time undisputed, okay? So we just have to sit back and wait and see how things play out. But long story short, I just think the mandatories for Crawford, I think the mandatories for Canelo or whoever ends up being undisputed at 168, and I think those mandatories for Jamel Charlo and Tim Tszyu, I think that complicates everything. But then again, you just don't know. Maybe Crawford really does get that opportunity to fight the winner of Tszyu Mendoza. Maybe he goes for that. And then now he has a belt, and now maybe, Jamel is still champion at 154, a unified champion, and him and Crawford could come together for undisputed. But that's in a perfect world where the stars line up. That's fantasy. The reality is there's a lot of mandatories out there. Sanctioning bodies want money. They want their belts defended. So I just really can't see them sitting back being okay with catering to a certain fighter, because at the end of the day, these sanctioning bodies, this secret society, they're all about themselves. But let's wait and see. Yeah, let's wait and see how it plays out. But I just think it's going to be several years down the road before he really gets an opportunity. And I'll tell you right now, they've already made it more difficult by taking a belt from Jamel. If for somehow those belts are further fragmented, it just won't happen for Crawford. Now bubbling up to 168, I don't know, man. We just gotta wait and see. But I don't know. What I'm doing is just having a conversation. Nobody knows for a fact what's going on. All we can do is sit here and say, hey, take it with a grain of salt. But out of everything we discussed, just understand how these sanctioning bodies work. And I just don't think they're going to cater to Terence Crawford or anyone else, unless you're Canelo. Y'all keep cool. I'm in the breeze.